Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Every day there are countless books and articles that are published offering the key on how to make your business a success. It's easy to feel overwhelmed trying to keep up and run your business. That's why Deb Creer created the Business Power Hour. Keep up on the latest trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. Let the Business Power Hour do the heavy work for you.
Good morning. Good morning. I am Deb Creer, and I am passionate about giving professionals the tools that they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. And we're going to have so much fun today. You know, I don't often get to say this, but I know zero zip zilch about what my guest is an expert in. I honestly had never even heard of it. So we're going to have so much fun today learning more about what Angela Johnson is going to be talking to us about. Angela, how are you doing today?
I'm well. Thank you for having me.
Perfect. Well, let me tell people a little bit about you, and then we will dive into this. So Angela Johnson is a certified Scrum Trainer, a CST. She is a certified LeSS Practitioner, which is CLP. She is co-founder of Collaborative Leadership Team, and she is the author of the Scrum Master Files, Secrets Every Coach Should Know. As a professional people geek, Angela helps others successfully implement Scrum and Agile to achieve their goals and objectives. So again, Angela, welcome to the program.
Awesome to be here. Thanks so much.
Great, great. Well, tell us a little bit more about how it is that you got to where you are today, and then we will dive into this.
I consider myself a bit of a broken corporate employee. I really had kind of lost my appetite for being an employee in a big corporation. And as some of your listeners may have done this too, I forged into the world of contracting. I was contracting my services out as a project manager.
Okay.
And as I noticed what other people were making on my services, I'm like, well, that doesn't seem that hard. A little more paperwork for a little more, hourly rate. So I started my own organization in 2010. And at that time I was working as a contract Scrum Master.
Okay.
And really had no aspirations of having staff, employees, a brick and mortar space. I just knew how hard could this be? I wanted to do it for myself. Well, I got busy. And so I started attracting like-minded people. And this year is my 14th year in business.
Wow.
And not only do I have a team and we are still here, we survived COVID, we have expanded to have a brick and mortar space. So I'm actually sitting in one of the little studios in our West End Conference Center that we opened in 2019.
Cool. I love it. I love it. Well, now, do clients come to you since you have space?
Well, it's kind of this double-edged sword, right? We opened this space because we wanted a professional space to hold our training events. It was really reflecting poorly on our brand to have it like in hotels or,
Starbucks.
Yeah, not going to happen. And so we opened our own space with the idea that we would always license it out to other people to kind of offset the costs.
Okay.
Well, then COVID hit and rocked our world.
Right.
So most of our training classes and client work for coaching happens just like you and I are, over Zoom or Microsoft Teams or what have you. But the part that's going gangbusters is other people using this beautiful space.
I love
thankfully. Because we are not co-working, co-working spaces will lock you into memberships and things like that. Nope. This is
sometimes somebody needs a space for a day.
Right. Or an hour or So we are enjoying seeing people again, and people who have let their brick and mortar offices go still have needs to get together once in a while. So we can accommodate that.
I love that. I love that. I think that's one of the things that we learned from COVID was we have absolutely got to adapt to a variety of situations. And that's part of what you work with people to do. So as I mentioned, I know nothing about Scrum. We were laughing before the program. The only thing I know about Scrum is that it's a rugby term. And then that's as far as I go with it, right?
Spot on.
So yeah. and that actually is really kind of the because I did Google it. So tell us what Agile and Scrum are.
For sure. 1993 is when the first Scrum team was formed,
Okay.
and you already nailed the metaphor.
Mm-hmm.
There was a Harvard Business Review paper that was published in 1986,
Mm-hmm.
and the professors who published that paper were talking about this different way of working. So instead of people handing work off from one person to the next,
Mm-hmm.
or from a specialty to a specialty to a specialty, delaying delivery value to
Mm-hmm.
customers, what if people got together,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of their specialty, regardless of their skill?
Mm-hmm.
What if they got together and worked side by side
Right.
with the focus of getting that value into the
Mm-hmm.
customer's hands?
Mm-hmm.
And they called it a rugby like huddle.
Okay.
They called it a
Mm-hmm.
scrummage. And so, two gentlemen who read that paper got very inspired. The creators
Mm-hmm.
of Scrum got very inspired by that, and they called it Scrum. So it's
Mm-hmm.
not an acronym. It is short for scrummage. It is
Mm-hmm.
just a metaphor for people working together to get something done.
Mm-hmm.
That's what my son tells people. Mommy teaches people how to work together to get something done.
Hey, that's a pretty good thing, right? Mm-hmm.
Right? So simple.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened, how did the A word come into being?
Mm-hmm.
And you said adaptive, and that was actually one of the names they all kicked around.
Ah.
So the two gentlemen who created Scrum
Mm-hmm.
got together at a ski resort in
That's a good
February
place.
2001, right? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Snowbird in Salt Lake City, Utah.
Mm-hmm.
And there were other people there. Now,
Mm-hmm.
the other people who were there weren't talking about product like
Mm-hmm.
Scrum was. The other people were talking about software development.
Okay.
But they all were talking about this teamwork stuff
Mm-hmm.
and this doing work differently. So they're like, okay, we have so much in common, even though our frameworks are different.
Mm-hmm.
We should call it something. Let's call it light. Gross.
Yeah, it
Let's
did make
call it
sense. Mm-hmm.
adaptive. Well, one of the people had a book called Adaptive
Mm-hmm.
Software Development, and they said,
Mm-hmm.
no, he'll get all the credit. So they said agile, and they actually
Mm-hmm.
stole that from the title of a business book. And it
Hmm.
was all about virtual competition, being
Mhm.
agile in the
Right.
face of global virtual
Mhm.
business.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, hey, the business community will take us seriously if we use a business word like
Mm-hmm.
agile.
Mm-hmm.
So Scrum is agile, but so is a bunch of other things
Mhm.
like extreme programming, DSDM, feature driven development. Scrum is the popular one,
Mm-hmm.
but a lot of people say agile. They've just latched onto the A
Mhm.
word, but that doesn't always mean Scrum.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
it's popular in the software space, but it
Mhm.
is not all about software
Mhm.
development.
Mm-hmm.
I have school teachers using Scrum to run their
Ah,
classrooms.
okay.
I have a graduate flipping houses using Scrum.
Mm-hmm.
We use Scrum to run my small services
Mhm.
business.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all about who's the customer, what's your product.
Right.
So it's just a framework
Mhm.
for getting things done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I love the concept that everybody comes together, because way back when I was still in corporate America, we had silos, and it was so frustrating because we didn't even have group meetings. You had, sales did something, then marketing did something, then this department did something. And, by the time you got to the end, it never matched what the people at the beginning wanted. And the people at the beginning might have actually been the people who had been talking to potential customers, and those people had said, hey, we want you to do X, and then somewhere along the line, all of those things changed. And then what you had to do was you had to go back to the beginning, or, sometimes you went, oh, look, hey, this is actually a better product. But it really was, is territorial, I think, is maybe the best word for it.
And you nailed it. The silos, that's the delay, right? The
Mhm.
delay of delivery value. And so one of the things I always look for is single points of failure. Even in my own business,
Mhm.
I never want to be the bottleneck.
Right.
I never want to be that single point of failure.
You don't want people
because-
saying, Angela, I sent you 8 emails about this.
Don't send Angela 8 emails. At email number 3, you're going to get a response that says, we're getting on a call.
Mhm.
We're
Yeah,
getting on
stop
a
it.
Zoom, or we're getting on a phone call. So
Mhm.
where are your single points of failure?
Mhm.
Where are your bottlenecks? If you
Mhm.
have too many silos in your organization, how is that adversely affecting your
Mhm.
end users or your customers?
Right.
That's ultimately what it's all
Mhm.
about.
Right. I was looking at your book, and it's a great book. It is a little complicated, and as you point out in the book, you need some prior knowledge about this, which I didn't have. So I was a little lost on some things. But one of the things that struck me was, that it is everybody working together as a team.
Mhm.
Well, that's great if we're all in one physical location. How does it work in this remote world?
We can still get together like you and I
Mhm.
are talking, and we've even got our cameras on. So we
Right.
can still get face to face. If we wanted to show something, some work product, we could do a screen share.
Mhm.
And so it's not that you can't work
Right.
together. It may take a little bit more
Mhm.
coordination, but it is possible even in a virtual environment. Some
Right.
people will nitpick on the Agile Manifesto
Mhm.
because those gentlemen did write down some things that they value, and
Mhm.
then they wrote things they called principles,
Mhm.
and one of them says the most effective communication method is face to face.
And
But
they're actually true, right?
true,
But
but it didn't say thou
Mhm.
shalt be in a physical room together. It
Right.
said
You and I are
face
face to face.
face to face.
Right. Right.
So it just cuts through the
Mhm.
clutter. I heard a statistic, 60 to 90% of all human communication is nonverbal.
Right. Right.
So how do we pick up on all
Right.
those gestures and
Mhm.
those facial expressions
Mhm.
if we can't see each other?
Right. And it is difficult when we're on camera, because, I might be, twiddling my thumbs to show, that I'm just, not happy, or, doing something like that. And it was funny. I was talking to somebody the other day who is totally remote. And she said, we've got a problem with one person. And I went,
Mm.
will not turn their camera on. And and so I kind of went through okay, do they have a camera? I mean, that was kind of the first thing, right? And
Right?
they said, oh yeah, because a lot of times they'll start, but then they'll turn it off. And I said, okay, are they uncomfortable with, say, where they're set up? You and I were laughing before the program that I have done interviews where kids were in the background, cats were in the background, all these things, because people don't always have home offices. And they said, no, they've got an office. They just don't like it. And it's not necessarily that they're an introvert. I interviewed the wonderful Summer Turner, who is an expert, and she is an introvert herself, in how to work. And she said, this remote thing is even harder on introverts. But she said this person just doesn't like it. And I said, how detracting is it? And she said, well, when you've got the Brady Bunch thing going on and there's a black space, it is detracting. And of course, then they're always saying, hello, are you there?
Right.
Right. And so, obviously, one of the most important things for anything like this is that you got to get buy-in from everybody. But in your book, you were talking about, what happens when you've got the one little rebel.
Mhm.
How do you deal with those folks?
So there's a wide range there. There's
Right.
everything
Because you don't
from
want to just fire them in most cases.
not necessarily, but you
Right.
maybe want to ask them because I find it's far more respectful. One of the Scrum values
Mhm.
is respect.
Mhm.
So it's far more respectful to ask that person.
Mhm.
Do we know why? Do we
Right.
honestly know the root
Mhm.
cause?
Mhm.
Maybe they're self-conscious
Mhm.
about looking at themselves.
Right.
Hey, this is a training opportunity.
Mhm.
Did you know you can hide self
You
view?
can turn your own camera so you
You
can't see
don't,
yourself. Yep.
yeah, you don't
Mhm.
even need to see yourself.
Mhm.
Maybe there's something from their background.
Mhm.
I work with Indigenous people,
Mhm.
and they believe that some of them believe that their
Right.
spirit will be
Right.
taken.
Their spirit will be taken away. Mhm.
So
Mhm.
until we get to the root cause,
Mhm.
we can speculate all we
Right.
want. The ego
Right.
can make up anything it wants.
And
So
we
somebody's
make
got
up
to
the
have
wrong thing.
all
Mhm.
the time, only every day.
Mhm.
So somebody's got to have a one-on-one with this
Mhm.
person to find out what
Mhm.
the actual problem is.
Mhm.
Now, depending on that answer, is it a condition of employment?
Mhm.
Because leaders have to set the tone. Leaders have to
Right.
say, here's what's expected of you.
Mhm.
But what you said, buy-in.
Mhm.
I'm a big fan of weigh in. People
Ah,
are more likely to put their weight behind an idea if it's theirs.
right. I
So
love
what's
that. Mhm.
that person's idea
Mhm.
for getting on board?
Mhm.
And does it have to be an all or nothing?
Mhm.
Can it be if you want your idea represented, you have to turn your camera on? It's
Mhm.
kind of, we call it fishbowl
Mhm.
because then they could turn it off
Right.
if they're just listening.
Mhm.
So baby stepping them in.
Mhm.
Can you make it fun? I had
Mhm.
a group of software developers. It was last year, and I remember the day because it was May 4th. It was Star Wars Day.
Of course, may the
And
fourth be with you.
Exactly. And the client is a longtime client of mine.
Mhm.
And so the manager was saying, this is going to be really difficult for you. This is going to be so hard for you for this workshop. And I said, no, it's not, because you scheduled it on Star Wars Day.
Right.
So I
We're
sent
talking to a bunch of nerds. Hello.
I sent his whole team a note that said, show up in cosplay, show
Mhm.
up in your favorite t-shirt.
Mhm.
If you have toys, if you have lightsabers, if
Mhm.
you have paraphernalia, bring
Mhm.
it. They were
Mhm.
dying to turn their
Mhm.
cameras on to show
Right.
all their toys
Mhm.
to their friends.
Mhm. I love it. Yeah, so
Mhm.
it's as you said, it's weighing in as opposed to
Mhm.
buying in.
Mhm.
And that's just important no matter what. We don't like to be mandated to, dictated to. Now, clearly in some cases there are rules. There are reasons for rules. But in other cases, why not say, hey folks, what if we do it this way? What do you think? And you might need to do some one-on-ones because that person might not be comfortable saying, you know what, I think I look horrible on camera. I don't want to say that in front of a whole bunch of people.
Right.
But yeah, so just kind of keep delicately and respectfully, as you said, asking them about it.
And who knows what the real reason is? And maybe they're miserable about the job. Sometimes when there's a behavior problem,
Mhm.
it's just a symptom. And it
Right.
is more respectful to
Mhm.
that person,
Mhm.
because if they aren't willing to get on board with what's
Mhm.
happening here, maybe they would be better off in another part of the
Right.
company. Maybe
Mhm.
they'd be happier on
Mhm.
another
Mhm.
team. Okay. Maybe
Yeah,
they
what
would
can
be
we do?
happier
Right.
elsewhere.
Right.
So,
Yeah. One of the things that you mentioned, we do body language and things like that. And of course, we've all seen and we've done it too, right? Where we've been in a meeting and somebody has said something we don't agree with. We eye roll. We, all sorts of things, right? And then we realize, oh gosh, I hope nobody saw me do that. It's a little bit more obvious, especially if it's a smaller group of people on camera. And so maybe they just are thinking, I can't self-censor myself to stop, eye rolling at this guy.
or I always look here. I look
Right.
right here
Mm-hmm.
between eyebrows, because if I
Mm-hmm.
see, I know somebody's confused.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
even in virtual
Mm-hmm.
workshops, I'll watch somebody's
Mm-hmm.
face very
Right.
specifically. And
Mm-hmm.
the minute I see it kind of
Yep. They
lighten
get
up,
the crunkle. Mm-hmm.
I know
Mm-hmm.
I answered their question. But
Right.
if I see
Mm-hmm.
this, I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
did I answer your question? And they're like,
Right.
yeah. And I'm like, no.
Yeah, no, that had a question mark after it, right?
Exactly.
Right. You mentioned that respect is one of the five principles, and I believe it's five, right? Am I correct on that? Of
5 values.
Scrum, five
Mhm.
values. So tell us a little bit more about that because I was fascinated with this part.
It's respect, focus, openness, commitment, and courage.
Mhm.
And so, one of the things we talk about respect, we just covered, focus is so important, because if everything is priority, nothing is.
Right. Every fire cannot be put out.
No, we have to focus because we're focused on delivering value. And
Mhm.
when you start focusing, it's amazing how you start reaching your commitments.
Mhm.
So instead of starting a bunch of things,
Mhm.
you actually start finishing. So
Ah.
you don't stop starting a
Mhm.
bunch of little things and never get them to
Mhm.
done. So commitment is not just about those goals and objectives.
Mhm.
Commitment, in this sense of it being a
Mhm.
Scrum value, is committing to
Mhm.
change. Have you ever started a diet and then just blown it? Like the
Oh,
third day in
never.
or the second day,
Mm-mm, no.
right? And then you're like,
Chocolate, hello.
I already blew it. So let me just finish the whole
Yeah,
pint
I
of
just
ice
have
cream.
more ice cream.
So commitment's all about change,
Mhm.
committing to the way we do work.
Okay.
And openness
Mhm.
is open to change,
Mhm.
open to feedback.
Mhm.
Because the thing about asking other people for it,
Mhm.
you're going to get it.
Mhm. Right.
So there's
And no
openness
eye rolling, no, right?
and courage.
Mm.
Courage is the most overlooked value.
Mhm.
Courage to look for the kernel of truth in that feedback.
Mhm.
Courage to try something different.
Mhm.
Courage to call somebody
Mhm.
out who's not
Right.
respecting
Mhm.
the team norms or the team ground
Mhm.
rules.
I love that. And you talk about, and your book is aptly titled about Scrum Master. What the heck is a Scrum Master?
Yeah, some people who are very interested in diversity, equity, inclusion, I'm one of them. It has nothing to do with, master, subservient, anything like that.
Mhm.
If you're familiar with martial arts, if you're familiar with like a sensei,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
The
Right.
master,
Right.
it's It's the master of Scrum.
Right.
So they just call it Scrum Master, like
Mhm.
the sensei.
Mhm.
They're a coach, they're a teacher, they're a guide, a neutral objective facilitator. So if you think about somebody who's on the sidelines,
Mhm.
they're not running out onto the field and ripping the ball out of someone's hands.
Right.
That person is giving feedback, making
Mhm.
observations,
Mhm.
asking powerful questions. So Scrum Masters are all about those people things, all
Mhm.
those soft skill kinds of
Mhm.
things. That's how they serve the
Mhm.
team. And as somebody who was previously a project manager,
Mhm.
that's not always the case. Project managers had a lot of administrative stuff they
Right.
had to do,
Mhm.
status reports
Mhm.
and project plans
Mhm.
and all that kind of stuff. Scrum masters don't have those kinds of deliverables
Mhm.
because that would be taking the team's accountability away
Mhm.
because you can't tell somebody, right, be more accountable. It
Right.
has to be
Yeah,
experience.
you're like, oh, okay.
So you treat people like
Mhm.
adults, they're going to act like adults.
Mhm.
So the
Right.
team who's doing the work,
Mhm.
we call them developers. It's just short for product developer. It's the
Mhm.
people doing the work. They are responsible for tracking their own things.
Mhm.
We have somebody called product owner, and that's the person who says, here's what we're focusing on.
Okay.
Here's who it's for. Here's
Mhm.
why we're doing it. Team, you're empowered on the how,
Mhm.
but I'll answer those questions if you need it.
Mhm.
So Scrum Masters coach not only the product owner, and then the developers, the product developers, the doers,
Mhm.
then they also coach the greater organization.
Okay.
Because as this team starts working in a different way, there's inevitably going to be organizational impediments.
Mhm.
And that would be a scrum master's job to tackle
Mhm.
that so that
Right.
we can keep the producers producing
Mhm.
better use of
Right.
their time
Mhm.
to go take those things on.
So I'm guessing that the Scrum Master is not necessarily the department manager, the CEO, the whoever.
Scrum teams are flat. Because
Okay.
if you have people reporting to each other,
Mhm.
now you're going to have behavior that's gamed a little
Mhm.
bit.
Mhm.
If a scrum master is really supposed to be neutral, but they also are the people's boss,
Right. They are responsible for your paycheck.
right?
Or mhm.
Those people are not going to see that person as a neutral.
Right.
They may not be transparent or
Mhm.
honest. They may
Mhm.
be gaming their behavior just
Mhm.
enough to stay on the right side of the
Right.
ledger,
Mhm.
to get that pay increase or
Mhm.
not, or yeah.
Mhm. Right. So how does an organization decide that they need to start having Scrum as part of their organization? I wasn't quite sure how to say that.
Yeah, no, it's a valid question. And because one of the questions that I ask when we get engaged with companies who say they
Mhm.
want to do this, my very first question is why. And it's
Mhm.
not to challenge anybody's authority.
Right.
It's not to sound like I'm for.
Mhm.
It's sincerely, why do you want to do this? Because we're
Right.
talking about changing the entire way work is done.
Mhm.
That's a big
Right.
deal. And if you can't explain that to people, if you're like, well, we just want to, hop on the bandwagon, the
Right.
buzzwords.
Somebody else was telling us about this, so we thought we
Mhm.
should do it too.
Leaders lose their credibility
Mhm.
very quickly when
Mhm.
that happens.
Right.
But organizations that are in real pain that need to do something
Mhm.
different, for example, an insurance company that I was working with, they said, we're not even looking at new sales. Did you
Mhm.
know millennials don't think they need insurance? I laughed, right? I'm like, I'm aware. Um,
Mhm.
so they're like, the statistic, the data that we're
Mhm.
watching is our renewals. And if we
Mm.
don't keep customers delighted,
Right.
they're going to go somewhere else.
Mhm.
So that's the metric that
Okay.
we're watching. And I
Mhm.
said, congratulations, I will still coach you
Mhm.
because you have a valid business reason. You
Mhm.
have a baseline measurement.
Right.
And now we're going to flip the switch
Mhm.
and change the way we do things
Mhm.
so we can see, are the renewals going up? Are they staying the same? Are they
Mhm.
dropping?
Right.
Now we have a metric.
Mhm.
But if the organization doesn't want to change,
Mhm.
this isn't really a great choice if they
Right.
don't want to do things differently.
Mhm.
Because you know what they say about the old definition of insanity.
Oh yeah. Mhm. Yep. Doing the same thing over and over again, right? Mhm.
And there's a whole lot of project management and traditional ways of working being called Scrum. And I just laugh because it's been around now for, over 30 years because the first Scrum team was 1993.
Mhm.
So this isn't new. It
Right.
may be new to many people,
Mhm.
but that's one of the things I would rather have with leaders as a conversation.
Mhm.
Why are you interested in change? What's your
Mhm.
pain points right now? What keeps
Mhm.
you up at night?
Mhm.
What's going on in your business?
Mhm.
Because this isn't an IT thing or a software thing.
Right.
This is we are all in this together.
Mhm.
kind of thing.
Right. So does it have to be everybody, or can it be a department?
It can totally be a department.
Okay.
It can be one team.
Okay.
What tends to happen when one team tries it or a department tries it
spreads.
Yes. Yes. Then people go, what are you all doing over here that you're,
Right.
getting stuff out the door so much quicker?
Mhm.
What are you all doing that you're
Mhm.
meeting your goals and objectives? Well,
Mhm.
funny you should ask.
Mhm.
We changed the way we did work. So
Mhm.
when I do coach organizations, I'm very clear that I'm not a fan of Big Bang.
Right.
Big Bang scares the crap out of people. It's rarely effective,
Mhm.
but that slow boil
Right.
is more effective. Start with
Mhm.
one team.
Mhm.
Pilot project. I don't even care if you
Right.
call it a project, right?
Mhm.
Maybe start with one department.
Mhm.
And then there will be this internal
Mhm.
data for the company to see, oh, if we
Mhm.
were to take this more broadly,
Mhm.
here's all the things that we just got as feedback that we're going to have to
Mhm.
take a look at.
Right. Yeah, it's almost like if they're going to say, okay, the entire company is going to implement this. There's probably a whole bunch of issues, and it may have reached the point where it's not fixable.
Correct.
Because it's almost like it really did just get to that point of, oh my God, what are we going to do? As opposed to, this isn't quite working the way it should. And like you said, whatever department, I mean, and so, yeah, it just kind of goes from there.
And what's hard about that, if they kind of phone it in or don't really give it an honest try, that kind of hybrid or Frankenstein-like approach.
I'm doing this because they make me.
Yeah. Runs the risk of becoming the new status quo.
Right.
And then they never really change. And so often people will say, well, the Scrum stuff doesn't work. Well, did you dedicate the team? No. Well, did you have an empowered product owner? No. So you didn't
do Scrum.
Try it. It's just like the person that says this diet didn't work. Well, did you follow the eating suggestions? Well, no, I had ice cream last night. Did you follow the exercise regimen? No, who can do all that?
That's no fun.
So you didn't follow any of it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, now, as we mentioned, there's your book, and you are certified and licensed and all sorts of things. And so you are obviously the expert, and you can go in and help organizations. Can they, and should they, or should they try to do it on their own?
I'm a big fan of experiments.
Okay.
I would be such a hypocrite if I said, no, you have to
must hire us,
right?
or somebody.
No. The nice thing about Scrum is the two creators gave it to the world for free. So it's actually in the Creative Commons. So you can go out to scrumguides.org. It is a plural because somebody beat them to scrumguide.org, but it's scrumguides.org. Download the 13-page official guide because it's more of a framework. It's not a prescriptive process. It's like guidelines, and give it a try. You're going to learn so much from just starting.
Right.
Now, generally people will say, okay, I've got some questions. That's where, someone like myself would come in, or we also teach publicly available certified Scrum Master classes. Anybody can buy a ticket and come to a class. And so what you're getting when you come to one of those is experience, implementation advice.
Right.
Because I could teach Scrum in 15 minutes. It's a 13-page document. It's 5 events, 3 accountabilities, 3 artifacts. Boom. Easy peasy. But it's, how does it apply in this situation?
Yeah. What if we've got that one person who
that's where you're really paying for the advice. And that was the power of the book. I really wrote about all my failures as a new Scrum Master. I took 6 of my best, worst situations and created those case studies. They're completely anonymous, so don't worry. There's no non-disclosures violated. And in anonymizing them, there's not even a single personal pronoun. So it literally puts the reader in the situation. And then the fun part is they have to work through it. And of course, I tell them what happened and what could have made it even better. And when I have new people to this read the case studies in the book, they're like, thank goodness. 'Cause I was really struggling for what this would look like, or what I would do if I was in one of these situations. And then hilariously enough, I have graduates of mine who are experienced read the book and go, that happened at my company. Are you sure that story wasn't about where
You
I
were writing
work?
about us.
Like there's just something universal
Right.
about some of these situations. And so thankfully I could give them different ideas or a different perspective on what they might try.
Right. And you change the names to protect the innocent, right? All that
And
good
the guilty.
stuff. Oh yeah. And it's obviously the guilty that in many cases is the problem. And I always ask my guests, I give me speaking points and things. And one of the things you said is that Scrum Masters are servant leaders, not secretaries.
Correct. So they got to get their hands off the team's work, right?
Okay.
So they're not the scribe. They're not writing anything down for anybody. They're all about how can I help? How can I help these people stop talking past each other and achieve their goals and objectives for this conversation? How can I help them learn this different way of working? Oh, there's something in their way that they need from the company. Hey, what can you do? Let me go tackle that.
Right.
So you can stay focused. Those are all the things about servant leadership. So I tend to ask, my workshops, if you have a servant leadership attitude, is it all about you? And people are like, no, because you'd be surprised what people think that phrase means. I had a manager who just decided she was going to be the team's scrum master. And of course, dismal failure because they all report to her. And she said, I'm a great servant leader.
and I bet none of the people she worked with would have agreed.
They didn't. And I'm like, servant leaders don't talk like that.
Right.
It's not all about you.
Right. I love it. Well, help me get my head around this. Give me another example of when, somebody has said, oh my gosh, Angela, help.
For implementing Scrum.
Yeah.
One of our favorite clients works nothing to do with software. So like these devices that I have on my ears, right? There's foam inside.
Right, little headphoney things.
Yeah. And so that was their product. And I was so happy because bored out of my mind with software. Not that software isn't important, but it's kind of old news. When you look at like what's happening with AI and chat GPT, software is kind of old news here. And so they were running in the red. It was a small company. I love working with small companies. And let me just tell you what I mean by small. 50. Okay. 50 people. And their leader told me that the last sale that they had, because they get some of these government contracts, for like
so they're doing
pilots,
a gazillion of the little earpiece thingies,
all kinds of stuff. And he said the product was so bad, they had to give the clients money back. Oh, to not take delivery on the product. And he said, this took 9 months. We are in the red. I need to try something radically different. And so we did a little 2-day boot camp and I did it on site at their location so that I could also do a little coaching, right, with the actual subject matter, not hypotheticals. And he did have a couple people who were grumpy, like, nope, not going to do it.
We've never done it this way.
And the rest of the team, thankfully, was on board. And so one of the things that we had to tackle right away was, what are you going to do with the I don't wanna? And they actually gave this person early retirement. They gave him an incentive.
They were out of there. Huh.
They were, because the other person who had the exact same resume, the exact same pedigree as this other person, he saw it as a wonderful way to teach, an opportunity to teach the less experienced team members. And they were having so much fun. Well, so the result is they went from 9 months to 9 sprints.
Wow.
And their sprints, their time boxes were 2 weeks long. So that's 18 weeks, 9 months, 18 weeks. And the quality was spot on. And they got more and more and more orders.
Right. Because you've got that time to do it.
They actually now have the contract with Mother Apple. Their foam is what goes in the AirPods. And I couldn't be more proud.
Yay,
but
babies.
That was just one of my best success stories. Right. So it's really fun when you can see the fruits of your labor. There's too many crash and burn stories, right? There's too many of them phoning it in and, oh, well, we want to say agile, but they don't really change.
Right. Well, and, it's also, like you said, sometimes it is figuring out what needs to change or who needs to go. And sometimes that solves almost all the problems, right? When you get rid of that person. But there was something that allowed them to stay. I mean, so it's not just that you had, Miss Grumpy Ump there. Miss Grumpy Ump was there because, nobody wanted to question it, or,
Right.
All of these various things. So there is still an issue. Now, my assumption also is that it's not Scrum one and done. It is something that, once you do it, you're going to go, oh, yippee skippy, we need to keep using this.
Well, my own organization, right? We'd be very, very hypocritical
Right.
if we said, oh, no, we work a totally different way. But one of the things that I think people newer to Scrum may not understand is that we don't use all the lingo because over time, it just becomes the way you work.
Right.
So why would we need to talk about something when it's just the way we work? If I think about project management, when I was a project manager, at no time did we sit around and say project management, every other word or every other sentence. It's just what we did. So with Scrum, I always know people haven't crossed that chasm when they're still using all the lingo.
Okay.
For example,
right. They haven't internalized it.
Correct. My team works with 1 week sprints. Now, sprints just a fancy way of saying time box, 2 week, 3 week, or 4 week. When COVID hit, we were doing 2 week sprints. And I'm like, oh, this feels like an eternity. My days felt like weeks. I don't know about you, but it was just like this weird thing that was happening to time. The other thing that was happening to our little company is change. The speed of change was just, rapid fire. So we went down to 1 week sprints so that in a 52-week calendar year, we now have 52 pivot points. Every sprint is a new opportunity to course correct, change direction. Does this company even say the word sprint? No. We plan every week. We have 1 week increments.
Right. And it is convenient that you can say week.
It is. But, people, it takes them a minute to go, oh, and then it's like, well, what about this 15?
A week, a month, or whatever.
What about, getting together 15 minutes or less for the daily scrum? Yeah, we talk for 15 minutes or less. And it's all about, okay, how can I help you? What do you need from me? Are we on the track? We don't need to run out the time all the way to 15 minutes. If the conversation took 8 minutes.
Right. Or it might take 18.
Right. And do we call it daily scrum? No, because it's just something we do every day. It's now become a habit, right? It's just internalized. So,
right.
Yeah.
And I love the concept of saying, how can I help? What do you need from me? Because that is, I think, one of the biggest issues in organizations, because they and back to the silo. My job is this. It fits in this little box, and it's what my job description says I shall do. And so this attitude of giving, it maybe is in many cases unique and scary, because people are like, what if I don't even know how to do, or what if they ask me to do something that I don't know how to do? Am I going to look like an idiot?
That's that ego talking, right?
Yep.
So on our team, one of the things that we really are quite sincere about and overt about when we hire is no ego. Everyone is hired with the title team member. And because we have our physical brick and mortar space, we're sincere when we say everybody washes dishes, even me. Yeah. So there's this can-do attitude. And if you can't do something, somebody will help you. And it's really fun for me on days when we have lots of events. I'll be out in the kitchen, helping out, making coffee, wiping something up, whatever. And in this day and age, unfortunately, there are people who still think it's, okay to go, oh, you're doing a good job, sweetie. Oh, thanks, honey.
Oh, yeah. Right? Here, wash this too. I gotta love being a female in an office on occasion.
Know, right? So I just smile and I'm just wiping the counter and go about my way. And I come back into the team room. One of my male teammates goes, are you going to take that? Why didn't you go tell him you own the place? And I'm like, no, this is just so much more fun.
When they discover it, because you see that little flash of realization, and kind of their, oh, I stepped in it, didn't I?
Like, nope. Well, what good would that? I'm like, no, it's just more fun for me to have my little laugh and go about my way.
Right. And obviously, if it was truly a lack of respect and something inappropriate said, then yes, that does need to be dealt with. I worked with a guy who absolutely positively could not call me anything except honey. Now, I was the only female in the office, so that was entertaining. I swear it was because he couldn't remember my name. I mean, it's not that hard a name, right? And I was the only woman. So, but yeah, he just honey, 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 honey. Now, every once in a while, I got a sweetie or something like that in there. And so I did it back. Now, he did not like that. But he figured it out.
Real quick.
And it was funny because our company CEO just kind of looked at us like, but yeah, I got my own name from then on, and it's also, I live in the South. Everybody here's darling and sweetie. And so there are different ways to say it where you're still being respectful. And sometimes I'll be honest, I'm like, I don't remember your name, so you might be darling today. But yeah, it comes back to that word respect, like you were saying. Somebody can say, thanks, hon, and there's nothing wrong. Now, should they be saying that? Probably not. But it is kind of one of those also, is this the battle we want to fight? Right.
That's exactly where I went with it. It's like, not today. Nope. I'm just going to smile and move along.
Yeah. And it's funny. I have a team and, all sorts of things. Yeah. There are definitely times where I'm like, nah, that's not a battle I'm going to fight. They'll figure it out on their own. And usually they do. But it's like with a lot of things, when they learn it themselves, it makes a bigger impression on them. If I had told that guy, do not call me honey sweetie or whatever, he would have looked at me like, I was an idiot.
What's her problem?
But yeah. And, because he would have said, well, I don't mean any harm. Or, but yeah, when he came to the realization that no, he shouldn't be doing that, then he never did again.
Right.
And so, yeah, it's, and whatever it is, maybe it's the consistently running late, or taking credit for somebody else, all of those, somebody else's job, that's quite often, it's, if it comes to them, if they come to the realization it's better. Again, there are times where we have to say, nope. Especially like it's women, right? When somebody takes credit for our work. Again, is it the battle you want to fight? Is it something little that really doesn't matter? But then the problem is, what if it's a whole bunch of littles that don't matter? Because those do add up. If they get into that habit of, I'm just always going to take, credit for Angela's work because I'm Angela's boss. But that's where it comes back to, works to have that level playing field, right? But yeah, we have to think about those things. And obviously, diversity, equity, inclusion is one of those things too. Are we making sure that we are, again, being respectful, treating people, whether you're religious or not, the way you want to be treated yourself, all of those various things.
Right. And it's interesting when I talk to diversity, equity, inclusion representatives from my clients, one of them made quite the impression on me because they called up and said that Scrum is really disrespectful. And I want to talk to you about that. And I said, well, that's interesting because one of the values is respect.
Right.
And so they started with Scrum Master. And I said, no. It has zero ties to slavery. It has everything to do with being the sensei, the master of Scrum. And you don't have to call the person Scrum Master if you don't want to.
Call it something different, call it something different.
You can call them coach. You can call them whatever you want. The guide says it's an accountability. It's not a title.
Right.
But I can't help but noticing, I'm so sorry, you keep saying resource when you're talking about your people. And they said, yes. That word is tied historically to the slave trade, referring to another human as a resource. So I'm just curious, right, where we're going with all this, because it's starting to feel really hypocritical. The other thing they wanted to attack was the stand-up meeting. And I said, there's nothing called stand-up. It's called a daily scrum. Right. Well, we call it stand-up, and we have people in our workforce that physically can't stand. I said, so stop it.
Yeah.
And she's like, well, we've been blaming it on Scrum. You mean we've just been disrespecting our people? And I'm like, yeah, sounds like it.
Right. And again, they weren't meaning to.
No.
But, and and it is tricky because, sometimes political correctness and triggering and things have run amok. But back to being religious or not, sometimes we do have to put ourselves in their shoes. If they could take offense, then can we change it? And sometimes you can't. I mean, there are just, like we said, some things where you just can't change whatever it is. But if you, and more importantly, if you make the effort. I had a guest who used the plural pronouns. And he had told me about it in advance, so I knew. They had told, see, isn't that hard? They had told me about it in advance. But I slipped a couple of times and I said he, and oh my gosh, I am so sorry. And they said, you know what? You're trying. That's the important thing.
That's the important part.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big fan of getting knowledgeable about that. So my point to this, diversity, equity, inclusion representative was, please read the Scrum Guide. Please arm yourself with the knowledge. My favorite, that's not even my quote. It's Edward Deming, copying without knowledge.
Right.
Because when people just assume, that's what gets us into trouble.
Yeah. And we know what assume means also.
Oh, yes, we do. So yeah, people are even trying to, because once they do establish the new habit, it's going to take a little bit. It's not going to happen instantaneously or overnight or anything like that. But yeah, arming themselves with knowledge and then actually trying.
Right. And to me, that comes back to respect, right? If I'm trying, that shows that I'm respecting your values. It doesn't mean I agree with them. We might not think that having, the plural pronouns, it makes sense, but that's not my decision to make for you. So, if you are doing that or whatever it is, then I should respect you enough and honor you enough. That's my new word. I've been doing a lot of things with honor. We need to honor them and do that because then it is also reciprocity, because there's probably something that I do that they think that is just bonkers. And so I want them to give me the same honor and respect.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, back to your book. You self-published, and I love that concept. So talk to us a little bit more about why you decided that was what you're going to do.
10 years of failure. So 10 years ago, I looked at the traditional publishing route. And no disrespect to people who go that route. They really put you through a lot.
Right.
And I had a client.
A little.
Right. And I had a client at the time where we had quite the success story. And I'm like, well, we're going to tell this story. And the huge pang of guilt that I felt going through trying to write it down, it's not my story. I didn't make all these decisions. I'm the coach who asked the tough questions. I'm the coach who educated them. But at the end of the day, they had to do the hard work. This isn't my story. So I abandoned it and it sat. A friend of mine who had gone the traditional publishing route tried to kick me in the butt and say, you should do what I did. I hired a ghostwriter and here's who you're going to work with. And and I did. And the ghostwriter worked for one of the big publishing houses. And I had a wonderful manuscript full of crap that didn't sound like me.
Right. They had really ghost written.
So then I was really frustrated, and nothing like a global pandemic, enter COVID, to really kind of make you scour your laptop and rethink a bunch of things. And as I was reimagining my virtual classes, the thing that was resonating with people were my stories or my case studies. And I'm like, this is it. This is what's in it for them. This is what's in it for someone else. And so I really used as kind of my testing ground, my workshops. And then a friend of mine said, I self-published through Amazon. My wife is a wonderful illustrator. She'll illustrate it for you. This is not that hard. And so coached me through getting the paperback published through Amazon as well as the Kindle, because it's available for Kindle. And so the next evolution was audiobook.
Right. So did you record your own?
I did.
Ooh.
So that was all about learning. So my husband and I took a weekend, popped in the studio here, and we figured out how not only for me to narrate the book, for him to
Mhm.
produce it. So it is available on
Okay.
Audible.
Okay.
But a couple students were really happy because they're like, I could just hear you,
Right.
reading the
Mhm.
book. And I was
Mhm.
just so
Mhm.
happy that you narrated it
Mhm.
yourself. So it is
Right.
me.
Well, and especially with the case studies, which is the bulk of the book,
Yes.
and because the thing about case studies, when they're done right, people can put themselves in that place. Oh,
Yes.
yeah, that happened to me. And
Hmm.
then hearing your voice just drives that home even more, because then they know, okay, when I work with Angela, she's already talked about this. And so, we've kind of got that relationship already built.
Right. Right. And so that just is music to my ears when I hear
Mhm.
people say that. And it's doing what it's supposed to do. It's kind of a
Mhm.
companion piece to the class, or sometimes people wind up in the class
Mhm.
because they read the book first. So
Mhm. Ah,
either way.
interesting. Interesting. Well, we've talked. I think there's, we've talked about it a little bit, but just a little bit more on how can we really do this in this hybrid workplace? Because I do think now I have worked from home for 20 some years, but I'm also a team of one, right? I don't need
Hmm.
an office, but I know that in many cases, sometimes the work gets done when you're standing around at the coffee maker and you're saying,
Hmm.
"Oh my God, did you see that the Chiefs have won again?"
Hmm.
And oh, by the way, what do and then just kind of stuff starts. So, how do you incorporate some of those little bonding moments into what you do?
Yeah. And the part of the Scrum framework that we didn't touch on is there are people would call them meetings, but
Mm-hmm.
we call them events because they're roll up your sleeves kind of
Mm-hmm.
working sessions. So there is one that kicks off the sprint to plan, but there can be
Okay.
a social element of that
Mm-hmm.
too. There is definitely that 15-minute or less
Mm-hmm.
daily, but to close the sprint out, there's a review, kind of a
Mm-hmm.
show and
Mm-hmm.
tell of what we produced.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have a closed door conversation called a retrospective, where
Ah.
the product owner, Scrum Master, and the people
Mm-hmm.
who did the work just get to talk to each other very
Mm-hmm.
candidly about how that went.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be social. There can be,
Mm-hmm.
a fun element to it.
Mm-hmm.
But during the week or during a sprint, if your sprints are longer than a week,
Mm-hmm.
you can schedule a virtual water cooler. I know so many of my teams
Mm-hmm.
that do virtual coffee chat,
Mm-hmm.
virtual water cooler,
Mm-hmm.
virtual happy hour. Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
those go better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a little alcohol always helps those conversations, good and bad, right? Mm-hmm.
But you can schedule it, and then it's
Mm-hmm.
not a mandatory
Mm-hmm.
thing. It's a whoever drops
Mm-hmm.
in, just like
Right.
if we were by the
Mm-hmm.
coffee machine in the
Mm-hmm.
cafeteria. So in the whole intent
Mm-hmm.
is social. Now, to your point, might a connection happen or something spark
Mm-hmm.
something about a work topic?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Absolutely. Just
Right.
like it does
Mm-hmm.
in the office.
Mm-hmm. Right. But I like that you kind of schedule stuff a little bit, because I was talking to somebody who at the beginning of COVID, they made everybody leave their cameras on all the time.
Oh, gross.
Oh, I know. I know. For one thing, we're all thinking, did I just do what I thought I did on camera?
Right?
And which is then, of course, why people started turning their cameras off.
Exactly.
But their thought was it's an open door policy, right?
Oh,
And so people could just, pop up and say, and even some of the other things. I mean, like you used to do that with Skype. You could just leave your Skype turned on and then people could kind of ping in and out. I hated that because, for one thing, I'm sitting here in a t-shirt, and and I probably don't want a CEO seeing me like that. So at least give me 2 minutes warning so that I can do something different, or things like that. But yeah, it was kind of one. Of course, they quickly figured out this is not going to work. This is not
right.
going to work. But kind of scheduling those informal little things,
Mm-hmm.
I love that, because I think
Mm-hmm.
it is, we do need those times, whether it's just to talk about what you did over the weekend, or because we are used to walking into people's offices, right, and seeing the
Yes.
pictures, all of those various things. And that's the thing now about our Zoom backgrounds, right? We've depersonalized them. I still remember some of the first, and I'm a big sports fan, hence the reason I knew what Scrum was. But when all of the TV announcers were on, and clearly had no clue what they were doing because, nobody was expecting to do this. And so we were all going, what books are they reading? And all of those various things. And now we've cleaned things up, right? We've got these. And so we've depersonalized, but I love scheduling time to have fun. I think we've gotten away from that. And yeah, the water cooler. Do they even have those anymore? I guess they do. But yeah. So
it's filtered water. We have a filtered water station.
This works. Well, oh my gosh, Angela, this has been so much fun. And we've just, you've really piqued my interest. So this would be something to have follow-up conversations about. But if somebody's interested, how do they reach you and what are the services that you provide?
The best way to find me is LinkedIn. Now, with a name like Angela Johnson,
there's 2 or 3 of you.
32,000 will pop up. Mm-hmm. So the best thing to do is type in Angela Johnson Scrum, and I will bubble right to the top. Mm-hmm. Send me a message. Mm-hmm. Let's start a conversation. Mm-hmm. Of course, our coaching and teaching services are available at collaborativeleadershipteam.com. Mm-hmm. If that's a mouthful for some folks, coleadteam.com will also get you there.
Nice. Mm-hmm. I love reroutes. So you obviously work with teams and companies, and you mentioned, kind of 50 is almost like the sweet spot. But what can somebody expect when they work with you?
We are going to ask the tough questions. Mm-hmm. So
like you said, the first one was why?
It totally is. And people will come to a class, they'll buy a ticket to a public class, and then they'll engage me at their company. Mm-hmm. And the first thing I'll do is sit down with the senior leader and say, why Scrum? And they're like, you weren't kidding about that. No, I was not. So they do need to be able to have a conversation about what their goals and objectives are, because any coach can't help you reach your goals and objectives if you don't have them.
We just want you to fix it, Angela.
Can't do that. If I could do that, I'd be on my private island counting my millions. So coaches help you help yourselves. Right. And we can help people identify the goal, but be honest about starting, right? Well, we want to explore it. We're not really sure we have a goal. Okay, let's start there. Right. But we can't really help unless we tackle those tough questions.
I love it. I love it. So what's kind of the average length of time that somebody might expect to work with you?
We really like 2 to 3 sprints, however long somebody's sprints are for a team.
Okay.
So if we have a team of people and Scrum teams are 10 people or less, we would expect to be engaged 4 to 6 weeks because it should be all about them sustaining this for themselves. You shouldn't need somebody from the outside. Indefinitely. That's learned helplessness.
You're teaching them how to do it themselves.
Right. I have been engaged with organizations for a year. If they say, start with one team and then we're going to roll you to another team
that makes sense.
And then to another team. So we can engage that way too, but 4 to 6 sprint, 4 to 6 weeks, 2 to 3 sprints. And that should be the sweet spot of getting somebody up and running.
I love it. I love it. So the name of your website again?
collaborativeleadershipteam.com or coleadteam.com.
Perfect. I love it. Well, Angela, like I said, this has been so fascinating. I really had never heard of this. Never, ever, maybe I need to get out about again. But yeah, I mean, this has just been absolutely fascinating. There were a couple of times where I thought, oh, this would really be good for this project that I'm working on, or, all these various things. So I'm going to go back and read the book in more detail. But, hopefully we will have you on again and you can help my little brain a little bit more. But until then, do you have any final thoughts that you want to leave everyone with?
Absolutely. One of my favorite phrases is, if everything is priority, nothing is. Even if you're an army of one, like you mentioned, or solopreneurs listening, ordered lists. Stop starting a bunch of things and start finishing. So ordering that list will help you immensely.
I love it. Well, I have been having so much time talking about Scrum with Angela Johnson. I'm Deb Creer, and until next time, everyone have a great day.
Tune in for our next program for even more trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. The Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer, is proud to be part of the C-Suite Network.